Topic 1I, bar graphs. So what is a bar graph? A bar graph is just a graph that uses rectangles, known as bars, to represent data or something. It may look a little bit like this. Right, bar graph, and so we have some categories down here, maybe make of car that people drive. And then we have some count or other representation here that we're measuring. Okay, so that's a bar graph. It uses these rectangles and then we can compare against that left-hand side to determine what the values are and what they mean. So that's what a bar graph is. Well, let's look at a representation of a bar graph. So I'm going to draw one up here. I'm going to deal with favorite types of movie. So favorite type of movie. So I'm going to put my bar graph in place here. And let's see, what type of movies do we want? Well, we might have a comedy, action, maybe a drama, or sci-fi. Maybe, well, I'm going to stick with that because I'm running out of space here. So I have those. So of those four choices, we survey a bunch of people. So we're going to have the number of people over here, right? And so we have 10, 20, 30, 40. So we go and we sample a bunch of people and we find that we get something like this. So we have our bar graph. And just to make some of you happy, I will straighten out that bar just a little bit. So we have this bar graph representing people's favorite type of movie. Once we have this bar graph, we can start asking some questions and getting answers to them. One question we might ask is, of the people surveyed, what was their favorite type of movie? Well, looking at this, we see that the action rectangle or action bar is taller than any other bar. So, favorite type of movie, the most popular type of movie? Action. What was their least favorite type of movie? The lowest bar is sci-fi. Right? So sci-fi would be the least liked type. Maybe we want to know how many people liked comedies. And we look over here and say, well, that's just under the middle there, so I'd say maybe 24. So 24 people liked comedies. We might even ask approximately how many people were surveyed. Well, I shouldn't have erased that. It's about 24. Looks like maybe 35. About 14. 9. 24 plus 35 is 59. 59 plus 14, 73. 73 plus 9, 82. So that'd be a grand total of 82 people surveyed about their favorite type of movie. And that's how we interpret bar graphs. We're looking at what categories are on what we could call the x-axis or the horizontal axis. We're reading off of the y-axis, giving us the counts, in this case, the number of people that responded that way. And we're just comparing the top of those bars to that y or vertical axis to determine what occurs. And we can look and see What's the greatest amount? What's the least amount? These bar graphs are used a lot throughout industry and people in business. They want to look at their top 10 selling products. So they have a bar graph that shows their sales amounts of these different products, and they look and go, oh, well, that's our top product, it's the highest. And sometimes they'll take these bar graphs and they'll put them in order from largest to smallest. So in that case, action and comedy would have been swapped in location, and we'd see action, comedy, drama, sci-fi going in that order, so it's easier for them to interpret and see, hey, which were the top sellers for that period of time that they happen to be looking at. So those are bar graphs. But that's not the only type of bar graph we may look at. So I want to talk a little bit, or at least mention, proportions. A proportion is really a decimal form of a percent, and we dealt with percents already. So it's just a decimal form of a percent, meaning that if you have 68%, then that would be a proportion of 0.68. Remember, move that decimal point 2 places to the left, and you get a decimal. So a proportion of 0.68 is the same as a percentage of 68%. So proportions are looking at a comparison. Of the total amount, what proportion thought a certain thing or did a certain thing. So that's where we're dealing with proportions. It also can be considered a ratio, because if you look at what we had before, we knew we had 24 people who liked comedy out of 82 people total, and we found that by adding up each of the columns, right, each of those bars, and finding out how many there were in total. Well, the proportion would be 24 over 82, which can be reduced to 12 over 41, or put in decimal form, 12 divided by 41, and I'm just cheating for a second to look at a calculator, gives you a proportion of, and this fits in nicely with our last topic with it, 0.29268, repeating. So that would be the proportion of people who liked comedy. So we can also deal with bar graphs dealing with proportions. So let's put one up here and take a look at it. This time let's look at hair color. We have a bar graph, and let's do our hair colors. We've got black, brown, blonde, other, right? Because some people have red hair, some people have gray hair, some people have no hair, right? So we got black, brown, blonde, other. And so we looked and we got a survey of people who had the different hair colors. And so now we're going to put the proportion that had each. So I'm going to number my axes here as 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and then proportion of people with black hair, proportion of people with brown hair, proportion of people with blonde hair, proportion of people with an other color hair. And so if we look at this, now we can answer the same types of questions. We're just looking at proportions instead of looking at total amounts. So one question I cannot answer from this is, how many people were surveyed? My only answer to that would be all the people that were surveyed, because I don't know. 100% of the people that were surveyed are included in this. That's about all I can do. But I can still say, which hair color was the most common? That will be the highest proportion, the largest bar. So most common hair color, brown. Least common hair color. Looking across, that's going to be the smallest. Other. So the other category had the least amount, or the smallest proportion. What was the proportion of people with black hair? Looks like 0.2. And remember that proportions are just percentages put as a decimal, so I could say if the proportion was 0.2, then moving that decimal point over 2 places would make that the equivalent of 20% of the people had black hair. So we treat it just the same as we do a regular bar graph. It's just now we're looking at the proportion. It's in comparison to the total amount as opposed to just being the counts per category. So that's an introduction to bar graphs.